1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk, coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. We are streaming on nccradio.org. Tell everybody out there they can join us right on the internet. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program is repeated Sunday evenings at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Pearl, P-E-R-L. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This all depends when you are listening and watching. Gewalt, how could I forget? You can watch us on Facebook Live at WHPC or my own page at facebook.com, Anshul Pearl. You can make a comment, you can make a post, you can say something, but say it already. So hello on the radio, hello online, hello on the world, as I say good morning to Gene Brandonston. Thank you so much. Oh, do I have a program for you? You shouldn't know from it. So stay tuned, everybody, as we come to you every Sunday morning to share with you ideas. This is a program that speaks in Yiddish, but speaks in English. Let's first take a look on what we can learn from the fact that yesterday in the synagogues all over the world, we studied the longest portion in the entire Torah. 176 sentences. Unbelievable. A meaningful morning from Golan, Matan, Zev, Leali, Boaz, Geffen in Connecticut for Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Happy Father's Day to Eitan Kilshevsky, to Larry Polonetsky. Good morning. So happy to see everybody. And everybody out there celebrating. If you're a father, please stand by. Let me know. I'll send you over a nice tie. I've got some ties left over from the year 1968, and I love to give them away on Father's Day. So let's understand we have the longest single portion in the entire Torah. And towards the end of this portion, the Torah describes the offerings that the tribal leaders brought in honor of the inauguration of the tabernacles. As we all know, there was a temple in Jerusalem, 2 of them. But prior to that, there was this mobile tabernacle that traveled with the Jewish people throughout the 40 years, and then for several hundred years in the land of Canaan, in Israel, until it was it warped into, so to speak, into the temple. So we learn how, in order of the inauguration of the original tabernacle, the Mishkan, the offerings were brought by the leaders. The tabernacle was now complete. It was the first day of the month of Nisan. That's the portion of Bayom HaShmini, the 8th day of the inauguration. So it was on the calendar, it was the first day. And the tribal leaders brought offerings on behalf of their own tribes. What I'm going to share with you, dear friends, is the definition and the criteria of what it makes to be a leader. Who were these leaders? They were the prince of each tribe. In Hebrew, it was called a Nasi. Was not only its political leader, but also its spiritual leader, which is fascinating, which basically runs contrary to what we see around us today. You have political leaders, but spiritual leaders, forget about it. But in those days, if you were the leader, you had both the political acumen and, most importantly, the spiritual leaders. Let me give you the background. What kind of people were actually appointed to lead the Jewish people at that time? Rashi points out that they were the leaders of the tribes, explaining that who were these people? These were the same men whom the Egyptians appointed as officers over their Jewish brethren during the many years of torture and servitude in Egypt. These Jewish officers were instructed to beat the Jewish slaves if they failed to produce their quota of bricks. But they had compassion, and they refrained. So what happened? Instead, when the bricks presented to the Egyptian taskmasters were fewer than expected, the officers themselves took the beatings. Therefore, these officers merited to become the tribal leaders years later. The Medrash points out that the Hebrew term mata means both tribe and stick. Therefore, Roshei Hamatot, which is the term used in the Torah, can mean both they were the heads of the tribes, but also the heads that were beaten with sticks. Back when Moses informed the Jewish people of the items required for the construction of the tabernacles, these leaders did not donate first. They said, let the people bring what they can, and we'll fill in whatever is missing at the end. As the wealthiest Jews, they could have theoretically provided everything on their own. But as true leaders, their aim was first and foremost to ensure that the people did all that they needed to do. Only then they think of themselves. Again, totally contrary to what we see today. When Moses announced that all necessary items had been donated and the construction campaign was over, oy vey, the leaders were caught off guard, having not given anything. Ultimately, though, they were able to provide the precious stones for the high priest's apron and breastplate. So now, with the tabernacles complete, the leaders eagerly seized the opportunity, this time to be the first to bring these offerings, wanting to avoid the mistake they had made 6 months earlier. What did they bring? Stand by, everybody, as we say hello to Jonathan Wolf. Good morning. They brought their offerings before the Lord. What were they? What did these leaders now donate? 6 covered wagons and 12 oxen. A wagon for each 2 chieftains and an ox for each one. So each tribe presented 1 ox. That meant altogether it would be 12 oxen. And each tribe, 2 tribes shared 1 wagon. So there were 6 wagons. And they presented them to the tabernacle. As we say, good morning to David Klitnick. God instructed Moses to give these wagons and oxen to the Levites to be used to transport the tabernacle whenever the Jewish people traveled in the desert. There was no Uber in those days, so they had to use, these oxen and these wagons. Now, as we say good morning to Rosemary Hoffman, unbelievable. Rosemary Hoffman and Kim were the first to wish me a happy Father's Day. Kim, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Rosemary, thank you for being so kind and wishing me a happy Father's Day. Now, regarding the service of these Levites, the verse says, from the age of 30 years and upwards until the age of 50 years. That was their time frame. They were then fit to perform the service in the tabernacle, carrying, etc. And they were appointed by Moses, each man to his service and his burden, is the term used. What exactly was the Levite service and what was their burden? And Rashi steps in and explains. First of all, it refers to the music. This was heavy-duty work, playing the cymbals and the harps when they accompanied these sacrifices. And the purpose of the music was to rouse the people spiritually during the offerings. But additionally, there was another burden, literal burden, and that was the carrying of the tabernacle's components when they traveled through the wilderness. They didn't have, these companies who came around and picked up things. They had to do it themselves. The Levite family was divided into 3 clans, one for each of Levi's son, Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. They transported the tabernacles after it was disassembled and prepared it for travel. Now, this is how it worked. 2 of the wagons donated by the tribal leaders was given to the families of Gershon. Why? They transported the tabernacle's tent coverings and the tapestries. The other 4 wagons were given to the families of Merari, because they traveled, they schlepped along, they transported the sanctuary's wall panels, the sockets, the posts, and the other structural components. But guess what? No wagons were needed for the 3rd family, the family of Kahat, since what was their burden? they had to carry the vessels of the tabernacle. And they were so holy. We're talking about the menorah, we're talking about the ark, and all those aspects. They were so holy, they didn't use wagons. They bore them, they carried them on their shoulders. So it appears that the leaders of the tribes calculated exactly how many wagons would be needed and donated 6, along with 2 oxen for each wagon. So the question arises, why only 6 wagons? What is this 6 wagons? The leaders, they were people who had everything. They were wealthy people. Each could have easily donated a wagon or 2 on their own. Figuring out precisely how many wagons it would take and donating exactly that amount seems a bit frugal. The Talmud describes that the 6 wagons piled so high that the beams would sometimes fall off, requiring that a spot be reserved for the Levite who would hop on and restack the beams each time they fell. Now, amazing. Had these wealthy, dedicated leaders donated more wagons, the work would have been much more easier, and Levites could have been free to concentrate on the many other tasks that they were responsible for. So why, as we would say here, why do they pile it on? The Rabbi explains that we have a tremendous life lesson from this, and that is we must maximize our potential. Nothing in this world should be wasted. When a person finds an opportunity to do a good deed, they must seize it and make the most of it. We may find ourselves thinking, why should I be the one to do this? There are so many others who can do it just as well. Am I expected to pile my wagon up to the top? To pile it so high with stuff that a Levite needs to climb up to make sure nothing falls off? Why should all the pressure be on me? It'd be better to spread it around. Let others get involved. One of my favorite classic books on fundraising, it was published in the mid-1970s. It offers an interesting, timeless lesson. A philanthropist was asked to contribute $10,000 to a charity. The wealthy man replied, "Why are you asking me for $10,000? I have even better idea. You should solicit only $10 from 1,000 people. And you will end up with $10,000, and you have spread the burden around." When you get this kind of response from a philanthropist, which I do many times, noted this expert on fundraising, you should take away 3 things. Number 1, this is a guy who is good at maths. No, shine, mazel tov. Number 2, this is a guy who loves to give advice. And number 3, most importantly, this guy isn't giving you more than $10. The Rebbe taught that we need to maximize our potential. Take your wagons, load them to the top, and do whatever it takes to ensure the load doesn't topple. Life is not a vacation. Life is not an opportunity to sit back and see what others can do. Life is about being an active partner with God. If you can find space on 6 wagons, but look to send some of your burden to a 7th or an 8th wagon, you're not going all out. Sure, it may be challenging, and spreading it out would make life much easier, but you would be letting some of your potential go to waste. Let the pressures and the burdens pile on. Live life to the fullest, and contribute your utmost to God and to everybody around you. See, at the conclusion of this portion, the longest portion we read in the synagogue, the tribal leaders once again donate to the tabernacles. This time, all 12 of them bring separate, albeit identical, offerings on consecutive days. Despite being identical, the Torah enumerates each tribal leader's offering verbatim, sparing none of the details. For example, the first tribal leader to donate was the famous Nachshon ben Aminadab, well known to Eitan. This was the leader of the tribe of Judah. And the verse tells us his offering was 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, 1 spoon weighing 10 silver shekels of gold filled with incense, etc. It goes on and on and repeats all 12 tribes. Now, a profound lesson emerges from the simple play on the words. It says, kaf achat, 1 spoon, asara, weighing 10 shekels, zahav malea, of gold filled with incense. The word kaf also means palm or hand. So we can now read it as follows. If a person extends his hand to give 10% of his earnings to charity, God rewards him with fistfuls of gold. Similarly, we learned earlier on, when discussing one of the mandated contributions to the priest, to the Kohen, the verse says, every offering of the children of Israel's holy things which is brought to the priest shall be his. The simple meaning of this verse is that his refers to the priest. But the Torah also is teaching us something much deeper. How can we guarantee ourselves wealth? The answer is not necessary to work harder. There are people who work hard and don't make a lot of money. The answer is not necessarily to make good investments. Every investment looks good when you make it. The Torah tells us the answer here. If you want to accumulate wealth, give gifts to the Kohen. Give the tithe to God. Give to charity. And when you do, it shall be his, which means the money you give away will be yours, because God will reward you with wealth. When giving charity or acts of kindness, it's easy to assume that the recipient is the beneficiary. But that's not the case. The Torah teaches that when we give, we are the ones who benefit the most. There's a beautiful story told about a great rabbi who lived many hundreds of years ago in a Muslim-majority country. He was a man of great wealth and substantial influence. Over time, he was even appointed advisor to the caliph, with whom he enjoyed a very close relationship. The caliph, however, had other advisors who were anti-Semitic. What else is new? They harbored a strong hatred for the rabbi and constantly sought ways to undermine him. At every opportunity, the other advisors spoke ill of him to the caliph, calling him a dishonest crook and accusing him of hiding his money. Finally, the caliph summoned the rabbi and asked him point blank how much he was worth. And he answered 25,000 gold dinars. That's how the rabbi responded. Knowing full well that the advisor's net worth was closer to 250,000 gold dinars, the caliph was understandably upset. The accusations are true, he thought, and he had the rabbi imprisoned. Several weeks later, still troubled by the whole incident, the caliph visited the rabbi in the dungeons. "You're a good man," the caliph began, speaking softly and earnestly. "I know that you're an honest man, and I cannot understand why you lied to me and told me that you only are worth 25,000 gold dinars. We both know that you have at least 10 times that amount." "Your Highness," responded the rabbi, "you didn't ask me how much money I have. You asked me how much I'm worth. I'm only worth the amount that I give away to charity. Everything else can be taken away from me at any moment." The only thing of real value that we can accumulate in our lives is what we give away and do for others. Our mitzvahs, including the mitzvah of charity, are all we truly possess. So let's create massive piles of them. And now I'm going to, first of all, say hello to Linda Zellickson, those joining us on Facebook Live, and thank you for all the wonderful comments coming our way. One morning, Kim Brooks made a split-second decision to leave her 4-year-old son in the car while she ran into a store. She returned minutes later and drove off with her son safe in the back seat. What she did not know was that a bystander had videoed her and called the police. Before she knew it, she was a wanted criminal with an arrest warrant under her name. Well, the ensuing drama spurred her to investigate the broader role America's culture of fear plays in parenthood, culminating in a best-selling book called Small Animals. And one of the basic questions Brooke asks is, of all the emotions inherent in parenting, is there any more universal or profound than fear? Working from this assumption, she argues that we're caught in a somewhat of a backlash to a backlash, which means parents were once overprotective of their children and guided them too stiffly. So society pushed back and produced the hands-off parenting of the mid-20th century. Today, there's backlash to that too, and parents are handcuffing their children more than ever, terrified of what could happen if they don't. So where do we go from here? A backlash to the backlash to the backlash? And then another backlash in 30 years from now? So let me bring you up to speed on a fascinating case that's well known from biblical times. It's all about Samuel the Nazarite. One of the larger topics discussed again in this portion, which is the longest one, Parshas Naseh, and we had the great honor of having Levana Cohen-Lichter join us this week. Thank you, Levana. Good morning. One of the larger topics discussed is about the Nazarite. What is that? That's a person aspiring to adding more holiness, makes a vow to abstain from wine. And this person is not allowed to cut his or her hair and must avoid coming into contact with a dead body. Torah tells us, speak to the children of Israel, you shall say to them, a man or woman who sets themselves apart by making me a Nazarite vow, etc., etc. There aren't very many recorded Nazarites in Jewish history, but there are some famous ones. Coming in with the biggest celebrity status is probably Samson, the Jewish judge who was the impossibly strong nemesis to the Philistines in his days. Another, perhaps lesser known, but even more important Nazarite is none other, a good friend of Eitan, the prophet Samuel, Shmuel Hanavi. The origins lie in the prayer of his tormented mother, Hannah, who was barren for many years. After suffering in silence for too long, this pious woman made her way to the tabernacle and begged God to bless her with an offspring. And guess what? She made a vow. She said, Hashem, Almighty God, if you remember me and you give me a child, I will give him to God all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. No razor is a reference to the laws of a Nazarite, which is not allowed to cut his hair. Effectively, Hannah conferred this Nazarite status on her yet-to-be-born son, such that when he would emerge, he was already in the club. But that doesn't really work. How can a mother take such a vow on her son's behalf? Besides the fact that it's questionable in Jewish law, the real question is, what right did Hannah have to so rigidly determine her son's destiny? What if the child grew up and didn't want to be a Nazarite? What if he wanted to go to Harvard instead? Or put out an album? Or become an academic in one of the famous, unbelievable universities that we have today? What right did she have to deny him that? We all appreciate a mother's wish for a son to walk in the ways of piety, but surely Hannah was aware that parents' values don't always trickle down to the children. On what basis did she take the liberty to swear her son's life to her idea of the proper path? Here, my friends, I have something shocking to tell you. Stand by. If you're standing, please sit. If you sit, please stand. If you're near a wall, please lean it. Lean against the wall. If you need air, position yourself near a window to be able to take in more air. The role of parents, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for this? Are you ready? Hello, I'm talking to you. Are you ready? You know what parenting means? Transmitting your values. Oy vey, I hope everybody hasn't fainted right there and then. We saw an example of that, of fantastic transmitting of values in what happened last week on Long Beach, on the beach in Long Beach in the south of Long Island. Parenting means transmitting your values. What a dirty word to say. The short answer is that Hannah understood, arguably, the most critical part of parenting. The definition of parenting itself is transmitting values. Parents must do all sorts of things, but so much of what they do falls under the category of providing something. We provide physical, emotional, and psychological needs. Whether it's giving the child supper, waking them up in the morning, paying for college, or listening to them talk about their daily woes, it involves a lot of providing. So when do we get a chance to, parent? When do we get a chance to parent? The verb I'm talking about. Every day. How do we do this? By transmitting values to our children. I know I have to repeat it because a lot of people have fallen asleep. The idea of what is the responsibility of a parent, primarily to not just simply to provide, but to transmit values to our children. You can shell out hundreds of thousands of dollars for the best private schools. Spend time with your child every weekend in Disneyland. Ach and weh. But if you're not going to teach them what they're supposed to care about, they're going to learn it somewhere else. And sadly, we see today's young men and women participating in extraordinary, disgusting events. And if whatever is important to you, what you care about, is really important to you, it will be important to your child as well. So while Judaism understands that people have a free choice, it's emphatically against the let the universe raise the children approach. Like Hannah, parents are supposed to have a vision of their own values and then transmit them to their children. Parenting is an awesome responsibility, and to absolve ourselves saying, my child can make his or her own decisions is nothing less than tragic. No one can guarantee that if you do X in your parenting, the result will be Y. There's always a great deal of uncertainty, and sometimes kids turn out very differently from how we expect. After all, it's really entirely in the hands of God. But one clear lesson we can take from the story of Hannah, that Samuel, and the story of how she made him, even before he was born, into a Nazirite in this vow, is this, that really Hannah wasn't delusional. She knew that she could not, on her own, make Samuel a Nazirite by her vow. She also knew that ultimately, when Samuel grew up, he would only be a Nazir by the force of his own choice. Yet she still prayed to God and made that vow. God, if you give me this child, a razor will not come upon her head. I make a vow to do everything in my power to train him as a Nazir. In anything we do, we can only control our efforts, not the results. This applies to parenting, perhaps more than anything else. Hannah teaches us that the Torah expects us to put in that effort. We can't make decisions for our children, but we have significant influence on the decisions they make for themselves. At the end of the day, we can and must influence our children's eventual decision making. Backlashes will continue to circle around, but the Torah's truth remains. Parenting is a responsibility to teach values to our children. We try our best and pray to Hashem, to God, that He makes it work. My friends, I now would like to continue to discuss a rather puzzling scene in the book of Bereshit. And that is, it depicts the birth of Jacob's youngest son. Let's step back for a moment. Watch this scene unfold in front of you. Jacob's wife, Rachel, had excruciating labor pains, and she realized that she would not survive her ordeal. And in her final moments, Rachel looks down on her newborn infant with infinite tenderness and profound emotion. And with the last ounce of strength that she had left, the Torah says, Vatikra Shmo, she named him, Rachel named her child Ben-Oni. Ben-Oni translates the son of sorrow. I'm not talking about the son of Sam. I'm talking about the son of sorrow. But Jacob was dissatisfied with that name. For we are told, look it up, Va'aviv karaloi Binyamin. And his father called him, the same child, Benjamin, the child of strength. That's the translation. At what was his son's birthbed and his beloved wife's deathbed, Jacob overruled Rachel, vetoing her dying wish. Now, I've read this story many times, and I've struggled to understand Jacob's conduct. Previously, when his children were born, Jacob had been happy to leave the name name the selection to the mother. We also know that he loved Rachel deeply. Remember, he had served her father Lavan for 14 years specifically so he could marry her. So what's going on here? So why then did he intervene in this instance and refuse to comply with his beloved wife's last wish? She wanted to call this child Ben-Oni. He steps in and says, hello, I want to call him Benjamin. Think about this. In the ancient world, particularly in the Torah, one's name was more than just an identifying label for future social security. It declared something to the world about who you were and what you stood for. A name expressed an ideal to which its bearers were expected to dedicate their best efforts and talents. It was a destiny. By the way, if you have children or are having children, you as grandparents should mind your own business and let the children decide the names for their children. You can make suggestions, especially if you're a parent who've passed down important, values to your children. But to insist and get angry and to go berserk because they didn't mention this one or that one or not considering it, the Torah says you mind your own business. It's the parents themselves who have the honor of choosing the Jewish names for their children. Okay, so a name is a destiny. So here we have Rachel felt in her last moments, she's about to pass away. She was worried about what would happen to her child as he grew up without a mother's care and guidance. She feared that he might grow up bitter and resentful, being brought into this world as one who had no mother. He probably would not understand much of what she had stood for, or the sacrifice she had made in order to give him his life. He would never know her smile, a laugh, or listen to her stories of growing up in Lavan's house. In short, he would be a child brought into this world without a history, since she could not fill in the gaps for him the way other mothers did for their children, to tell them their story and to let them understand who they were. So she selected a name that would serve as a constant reminder of the tragedy that had overtaken her when she was born. And therefore she said, "I'd like to call my baby Ben-Oni, the son of my sorrow." That name, she was certain, would keep her son from ever forgetting her. He would try to live up to the noblest standards of his mother as a debt of gratitude to her and to her memory. She would always be with him in some way. It is an understandable impulse. Parents inevitably imbue their children with a complicated mix of wishes and fears for what they might become. They watch carefully as the children grow, trying to steer them right. I was reminded of this process a few years ago when I heard a 9/11 memorial service on the radio. The widow of a firefighter spoke of how her teenage son was getting himself caught up in the life of crime. Her husband had sacrificed his life to save others, and now his son was a bully. Robbed of the opportunity to have the male role model he so badly needed. She was heartbroken, and she felt like a failure. She just couldn't do the job of a husband as well as her own. One evening, she told her son the following story. There was a couple who yearned for a child of their own. After many years and many visits to the medical specialists, the woman conceived. But when she was about to give birth, the doctor informed her husband that something had gone horribly wrong, and either the mother or the child might be saved, but not both. The husband favored saving the mother, but when the mother heard of her husband's decision, she was furious. If the baby would not be saved, she would commit suicide. So then both lives would have been taken away. So reluctantly, and with deep misgivings, the doctor saved the baby, and of course tried mightily to save the mother. And as he had feared, however, sadly, she passed away. In time, the baby grew up to be a strong and handsome boy, but without the softness and the gentleness of a mother to guide him in his formative years, he grew up to be selfish and nasty. When he was of age, his father sent him to an out-of-town college in the hope that new friends and a different atmosphere would better his character. But the reports that he received were very discouraging here too. His son was continuing to go down the wrong path. One day, the father sent his son a letter telling him to come home immediately. An urgent matter had come up. That's what he wrote. It's like the story about the guy sends a telegram. He says, "Start worrying now. Details to follow." The young man, fearing the worst, took the first available plane home. His father met him at the airport, but instead of explaining why he had asked him to come home, he drove him to a remote cemetery and stopped at a well-kept grave. There he told his son, for the first time, the story of his birth and how his mother had died. After finishing the story, he said to him, my son, now that you know that your mother died in order to give you life, turn around and face her tombstone and tell her whether it was worth it." After sharing this story with her son, the firefighter's widow turned to him and said, "I can't take you to your father's well-kept grave because he is buried somewhere underneath the World Trade Center. But the next time you're on the street causing mischief, look up at the New York skyline and remember his sacrifice and ask yourself if it was worth it." Her words had an immediate and immense effect. "My son is no angel," the woman said as she spoke to the other mourners at the memorial the 9/11 memorial service, but since that night, he has made a dramatic turn for the better. And that, I think, is what Rachel had in mind when she named her boy Ben-Oni, the child of pain. She wanted him to remember her sacrifice, to face her tombstone, as it were. Of course, we can understand her intentions. She was doing what she could do to ensure that her example would outlast her. But Jacob overruled her deathbed wish and named their son Benjamin, which translates child of strength. Why? My friends, again, I suggest you go over to the window to take in the strength, take in air, because what I'm about to share with you is mind-boggling. Why did he change the name? Because he wanted the child to remember Rachel's strength and courage, not her pain and death. He wanted strength and courage to be her legacy and to be the story the boy would tell himself as he grew up into a young man. Precisely because he loved and admired Rachel, he wanted Benjamin to focus on how she lived, not on how she died. He equally did not want Benjamin to grow up in the shadow of Rachel's tombstone, but in the glow of her radiant life. Benjamin, the child of strength. Benjamin, the child of courage. Rachel would always be with him, but it would be the Rachel who had been bright and brilliant, the Rachel who let nothing daunt her, who was always resourceful and resilient. Friends, the two names of Benjamin are not just two names, but in the most profound sense, they also express two different ways to live Judaism. The first is animated by suffering, loss, and tragedies. It is haunted by anti-Semitism. The second defines us not as an object of persecution, but as agents of an exceptional vocation. And what is that? God's ambassadors on earth. For when we think of ourselves that way, it suffuses us and our identity with happiness, not sorrow, and is a Judaism that teaches our children that it's good to celebrate Jewish holidays. It's exhilarating to study Torah. And it's a joy to do a mitzvah and to help someone. That's a Judaism animated by Benjaminite, with a Benjamin strength. It reminds us that we come from prophets and kings. A few years ago, the Polish government held an event to celebrate the 85th anniversary of the Polish Air Force. They invited many countries, Israel among them. And they were invited to send contingents of jets from their own air forces to participate in the festivities. As a precondition to their participation, the Israeli Air Force insisted that their contingent's itinerary was to include a flyover above the Auschwitz concentration camp. Upon hearing this demand, the Polish curators of the Auschwitz Museum vehemently objected. What? They said, send these loud, deafening military aircraft over Auschwitz? This is totally inappropriate, disrespectful, and irrelevant or irreverent. It's a disturbance of the peace and the quiet of this very solemn place. My friends, you can't make this stuff up. The Polish authorities are telling Israel what the appropriate manner is for paying tribute to the memory of 6 million, insisting that the descendants of victims observe proper decorum. The Israelis were determined, and in the end, the Poles relented. On that incredible day, a contingent of Israeli F-15 jets, each of them piloted by the children or the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, took off towards the sacred, haunted, and dreadful resting place of their parents and grandparents. In the cockpits, these crew members carried with them the names of all those recorded to have been murdered at Auschwitz. The jets, proudly displaying the blue Star of David, flew towards the concentration camp as slowly as possible, following the railroad, those tracks leading into the camp and the crematoriums, and then peeled away with tremendous roar. No, it was not a quiet tribute to the millions who perished, nor was it meant to be. In the words of the Israeli ambassador to Poland, Shevach Weiss, this quiet had to be disturbed, and it had to be disturbed by the roar of an Israeli F-15 jet. This, to me, is symbolic of Jewish life. Yes, the Jewish people can be defined by tragedy, by the deafening silence of Auschwitz, by the persecution we have suffered throughout the ages. This would be the Judaism of Ben-Oni, a Judaism motivated by guilt, with a people who remain true to the ideals of their ancestors because of the tragic fate which overtook them. It would be a Judaism in which suffering and sorrow prompts us to remember parents and grandparents in silence, in which we suffer in silence. Or, my friends, listen up, or we can have a Judaism that lives, that surges upwards, that breaks from past tragedies into a loud celebration. A Judaism that wants to be seen and heard to create a great and glorious noise and rock the earth and the skies with vibrant sounds. That's the Judaism of Benjamin, the child of strength, who in loving devotion to the teachings of his parents is eager to live and champion the cause of his people and their ideals. This Judaism is a Judaism that is motivated by Rachel's devotion, not by her death. A Judaism powered by Simcha Shel Mitzvah, the sheer exhilaration of the mitzvot, making the heart beat fast and the eyes filled with beautiful tears. It is the boisterous and the unapologetic, and it sings and dances in the face of adversity. Confronted by the choice of names, either Ben-Oni or Benjamin, the Torah chooses Benjamin. Both names are Jewish, and both reflect the truth of our history in our people. There are moments we all have a Ben-Oni in our calendar. Just look at the news and see what just happened now. Sadly. Yes, we have plenty of moments of Ben-Oni, moments of Sarah, when we do remember and mourn for those who've lost their lives. And of course, we absolutely must remain dedicated to keeping alive the memory and the truth of the Holocaust and of October the 7th, particularly when Jewish people are under the assault from many quarters. Nonetheless, victimhood cannot be the foundation of our Jewish identity. A Judaism animated only by anti-Semitism will fail to build the future. A Judaism animated by the stories of anti-Semitism will be bitter and hateful, and that is not the way to recover from our hurts. That particular kind of Judaism, my friends, fails to build the future because anti-Semitism, while it may remind us of who we are, provides no reason for us to want our children to be Jewish. On the contrary, no decent person wants to hand over to their children the burden of being hated and destroyed. This is why the generation, sadly, so many have been raised solely on the diet of Holocaust education, and it doesn't bode well. This does not hand on Jewish identity too well to those children. It is a burden that they are setting aside and unfitting and unfit to carry forward. Why should I be part of that? Without tradition, without mitzvot, without some element of observance, there will be no membership left for tomorrow. In a Judaism without the Torah, without tradition, without the flame of Judaism, its message and its purpose and its very essence, my friends, that is going to end up being lost if we don't have that as key elements. But when we do live a life inspired by heartfelt joy, with warmth, with depth, with passion, and with love, it thrives. This is a Judaism that everyone wants to belong to, a Judaism that makes the heart sing. Let me tell you, in Washington, D.C., there is a house on K Street. It has a Norwegian flag flying over it. It is probably not surprising to hear that the family that lives in the house speaks Norwegian. They celebrate Norwegian holidays. They dress up in Norwegian costumes. They sing Norwegian songs, and they have a picture of the King of Norway. There are thousands of homes in Washington, D.C. that don't speak their language or know anything about Norwegian customs. This family is a minority of a minority, and yet I guarantee you that they will never assimilate. They will remain proud Norwegians through and through. Why, you may ask? Because in this home on K Street lives the ambassador of Norway. And ambassadors do not assimilate. They love their country. They are proud of it. And they know precisely why they are there. Ambassadors are sent to represent their governments. But no matter how long they live in foreign countries, they never assimilate. Their calling is to share their culture, to tell everyone about the glorious traits, the habits, and the history, and the architecture, and the heritage of their culture, not to abandon it. The Jewish people, remind ourselves, we are God's ambassadors to the world. And so long as we love our tradition and remember who we are and what we represent, we will wave our flag proudly. That is a Benjaminite or Benjamin Judaism. That is the kind of Judaism that was the source of inspiration for hundreds of generations of our ancestors. An elderly man used to stand on a street corner in New York every morning, rain or shine, hot or cold. He was always there at 7:30 a.m. People passing by usually thought he was waiting for the city bus. Once, though, a man happened to pass by just as the city bus arrived. He noticed that the old man didn't get on the bus, but allowed it to leave without him, and just kept on standing there for another 45 minutes, bus after bus passing him by. But after all of that, he then went home. The man observed him again the next day, 7:30 a.m., 45 minutes, and then he went home. On the third day, he walked up to the old man and asked him, "Why do you stand here?" And he answered like this, "I went to the hell of the concentration camps," the old man replied. "I lost most of my family. After I was liberated, I thought a great deal about the future of Jewish people. How could we ever come back? How?" And he explained, "I stand on this corner every morning because standing here has shown me that indeed that we have survived, and we are stronger today than we have ever been before. Because from this corner, in just 45 minutes, 32 school buses have passed me, loaded with Jewish children going to Jewish school. 32 buses from one corner alone. I stand here, and maybe I sweat on hot days, freeze on cold ones, get drenched on the rainy ones, but my heart and my soul are warm. My spirit is alive. My faith in the future is secure." So with buses of Benjamins, that is how we build the Jewish future. Today, more than ever, we must all be part of it. Let's not just be a spectator. If we want our children, if our children are grown, let's help others. Let's volunteer. Let's build. Let's support. Because, dear friends, Jewish history is still being written. Each of us needs to help write it. I know today is Sunday, but nevertheless, let's say l'chaim. Not the l'chaim on a cup of whiskey. Let's say a l'chaim to life, to Jewish life. L'chaim to the holidays. L'chaim to all the weddings, to the chuppahs. L'chaim to all the brisim. L'chaim on building a sukkah, to lighting the Hanukkah candles, to dressing up on Purim. L'chaim to studying the Torah with passion. Let us kindle the torch of Yiddishkeit and raise it aloft in our homes and our community. Let's give our children and grandchildren a vibrant Judaism that they sorely deserve. A Judaism that they will cherish forever. Let us teach them to be the ambassadors. And yes, my friends, we will succeed. The Torah tells us that Benjamin gave Israel's cause to rejoice. For Benjamin ended up being the father of a long line of passionate and courageous Jews, none other than Mordechai, in the story of Mordechai and Esther. It was the tribe of Benjamin that was privileged to have the Temple of Jerusalem built on its territory. Because when we live a Benjaminite kind of Judaism, we build a strong future. My friends, just last Thursday, on the second day of Shavuot, I hope I said it right, Eitan Shavuot, during which the souls of our beloved parents and grandparents joined us. They were there with us, each and every one of them. The strength we feel and the optimism we project is their gift and our responsibility. Yes, during those Yizkor, there were moments of Ben Oni, moments of sorrow for our losses, as we remembered and made special blessings for those who lost in the IDF, and those lost in October the 7th, and those who lost in the Holocaust, and all these moments of Ben Oni, moments of losses. And that's how it should be. But during Yizkor, the primary focus is, let us face these beloved souls and tell them that all of their toil and all of their sacrifice for us was worthwhile. For we are your children, your Benjamins, continuing to live your ideals, and will courageously help to build the future of our people. Your eternal light will continue to shine and grow. Dear friends, happy Father's Day. This is Rabbi Pearl. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay well, and good news